So tonight's demonstration is by fellow member Bob Franklin. He's going to be giving us a demo on casting and stabilizing blanks.
Did you decide on Sunday or Saturday?
Sorry, thanks for reminding me. The board meeting, there was, since the shop tour is on Saturday at the same time, there was talk about either having a real short board meeting, maybe holding it up north, closer to the shop tour, or moving it to Sunday. Any thoughts? Anybody, one way or the other? Or should we do it a different week? Different day?
Is the store open at 9 on Sunday?
There, Rich is here at 6 in the morning, so we can get in earlier if we want.
Sunday's fine.
8 o'clock on Saturday. Larry, can you do 8 o'clock? 8 o'clock on Saturday? Can everybody do that? 8 o'clock? Okay, so we'll meet at 8 o'clock on Saturday. If you show up at 9, we'll have ate all the donuts by then. So I'm going to get donuts in it from a different place this time, too. So Rockler lets us in. I know people. All right, Bob Franklin, take it away.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. So when I talked to Pat about doing the demo tonight, I had volunteered to cast a blank for everybody to be donated to the EOG raffle. So we're going to do that during the course of the evening. With that being said, normally I would start out at the beginning and kind of walk you guys through the whole process, so you can see the steps involved all the way through it. That would be the ideal way, but unfortunately, since I'm doing that part of it, we need to get the blank that we're going to do in this pressure pot because it has to cure. It takes an hour for it to cure, so I'm going to work kind of quickly, get a blank cast, and I'm going to get it under pressure. I'll briefly talk about the process as we go, and then after I get it in the pot and it's ready to start curing, then I'll back up and I'll start again at the beginning and kind of walk you through it that way. I think that'll be the best way to accomplish everything that we need. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So if you have questions along the way, please stop me and ask. It's a lot to go over. It's going to be very little over there. If I have time at the end of the night, the blank that we take out of here, I will take it over to the lathe and show you a little bit about mounting it and talk about turning it. Basically, at that point, we would just take the skin off the outside of it. Even if this is tight in here, you're going to get some skin around it, some Alumilite, and you wouldn't be able to see what's inside until we just take that skin off the outside. And if I have time, I'll do that with the blank that we're going to donate. I wrote down in purple here the four companies that are three companies, or two companies, and then the dyes and the pigments that we use. Those are really Alumilite.com is fantastic. Turntex.com is great, and those are where we get 90% of our products, besides our dyes or besides our pigments. So again, we'll talk about this just briefly. I want to try to get moving on it to get it in here. How much time do we have even? Till 9. So we have an hour and 40 minutes. Okay. So when you're casting in PVC, with Alumilite, it's easy to cast in PVC. You need a mold release, though. Stoner, this comes from Alumilite.com. This bottle is probably 2 years old. I don't use it very often. I spray one of these, and I can probably do 10 blanks before I need to respray it. It's like cooking oil. It pretty much is, I think it probably is cooking oil, but anyhow. So I spray the blank first, the mold first, because typically if it was a piece of burl I was putting in here, I would put a drop of hot glue on the bottom of it and stick it to my tape. So I don't want mold release on my tape. So typically I would spray this and then I would do the taping. So the taping part of this is just going to be creating a bottom. And bring scissors. So we're just creating a bottom. This is just regular duct tape. It's cheap stuff. But it works very well for this. We want to overlap it about a half an inch each time. This is one of the cheapest molds you can make for Alumilite. And it, one of the quickest, and you wind up not wasting a lot of material when these square molds for us turners. If you're casting in a square mold, you waste a lot of the material when you turn it round. So this stuff is fairly expensive. These two jugs, 180 bucks shipped to my door. So you want to save what you can when you can.
What are the advantages of the Alumilite over polyresin?
Okay, so there's basically 4 different kinds of resins for casting that people use for this for blanks. Alumilite, which is a urethane resin. Now I've got a single layer on there, and we're going to do it again the other way. I want to just push it down good. There's a urethane resin, which is what this is. It's specifically formulated for hybrid blanks. So it's made to incorporate with a wood of some sort, a burl, piece of wood, and it was formulated to have less shrinking than polyester or epoxy. Those are the other two. It's a softer material. There's no odor with it. Polyester resin, you can do hybrid blanks with, I've heard. It's cheaper. It's very toxic. It's very, very high odor. And it takes a long time to cure. I'm not sure polyester resin, I think it's 6 or 8 hours. I'm not sure Ed and them would know that. They do more polyester than I do. I don't do polyester. It has its advantages, polyester resin does, I think, for clear casting. If you're wanting a completely clear cast, the guys that are doing pin tubes in pitcher blanks on a tube and then casting it in clear, that's what they would use as an epoxy or a PR for clear casting. Again, epoxy, same kind of thing. It's high odor. It's very, you'd want to wear a mask with it. It takes a little bit longer to set. This stuff basically, there's 2 different kinds of it that you can get through Alumilite. And one is a 7-minute work time. And the other one is called, and that's this one, it's called Alumilite Clear. There's also Clear Slow. It'll say slow here. Clear Slow is formulated actually for big casts like this. I think they say anything over 30 or 40 ounces should be cast with slow. It's less prone to cracking. You have more work time. You basically have 12 to 14 minutes to get it under pressure. And compared to this, we have 7 minutes to get it under. That timing is basically set on like 70 degrees, and humidity I'm not sure where at. I can tell you that we cast a lot of blanks all year long, and in the summertime I probably have 5 minutes. Right now, if I was in my shop, I'd probably have 10 minutes with it, as cool as it is. So anyhow, I just created a bottom on here, and I do 2 layers. just in case I get some seepage. And I'm going to go around it one more time here just to secure it all. If I get a little bit of leakage, usually with the short cure time, it'll set before it starts coming out. I didn't have anything prepped for tonight. I thought I had a piece that would work great, and I don't. So we're going to actually just do pine cones tonight. It'll make a cool Christmas blank. We can talk about orientation too, but you know, depending on what you're making, orientating the pine cones in here will give you different results. If I put the pine cones in this way, you're going to see the little leaflets around it, like this one is. This is one big, huge pine cone. This thing was 4-inch diameter by 6 inches tall. Ponderosa pine. So that's orientated like that. If we orientate it like this, when you start trimming the outside, if you orientate it like this, when you start trimming the outside, you're going to see all these feathers coming out of it, and it really makes a neat effect. So I'm going to try to layer it on the bottom, laying them sideways so that shows off on the side of the blank. And it's personal preference. You can do either way you choose. Everybody has their own style of how they would do one thing or another, and there's no right or wrong. So these have been dried and stabilized. You don't have to stabilize pine cones, but I do, because we sell our blanks. And I don't know if you can see this. That's kind of what I'm doing. I've got all the bottom ones laying flat, and then I'm putting one down the center. And then I'm going to layer the side again if I can. I'm going to try to keep it like that. This one's not going to fit, so we'll try to do 2 in there. All right, we'll do one upside down. And before I do that, I've got some mini alder cones here. These have just been dried. These have not been stabilized. So stabilizing cones, you don't really have to. And I'm going to go into why we would stabilize things here in a little while, and why we wouldn't, or why we need to, and when you would want to. But let's try to get this in. This is just to fill up some of them little voids, and I'm not even going to pull the stems off. See if I can get 3 in there, maybe. Pine cones, we found that you really don't have to stabilize them. The benefit to stabilizing them is that when you're turning it, the fibers a lot of times will want to tear out a little bit if you don't stabilize them. So we used to use just CA and soak the outside as we're turning and let it penetrate the cone, thin CA, and that worked well. But when we started selling blanks, you don't want to have to tell all your customers that that's what they need to do. So we started stabilizing them, and the fibers, when you stabilize them, the fibers don't tear out as bad. You don't get it. It's like ingrain tear out. You don't get that ingrain tear out like you would if you didn't stabilize them. So we do stabilize them. Now these are going to probably float a little bit on us. Now my hand's wet. So if they do, I'm just going to take a piece of tape and kind of hold them down. We may do this without gloves. Yep. All right. No big deal. I have a checklist at home, and it's kind of important when you're dealing with this much Alumilite. Having all your ducks in a row, so to speak, is pretty important, because once I start mixing this stuff, I have that 7 minutes before it's going to harden. Once it hardens, if it hardens and it's not in this pot, it's going to have air bubbles in it. And I just wasted all that Alumilite. The blank is going to be, it's going to be a lot of work. You could probably still finish it, but you would be doing a lot of filling. I just brought some dyes, and I'm going to go over them later in the demonstration. We'll do 3 or 4 colors tonight. And different pigments I brought. I'm going to get them all ready to go here. I don't know if I'm blocking everything where you can't see. There's no set amount of dye. When I start the process here, I will know whether I've got enough in it or not, and if I don't, I'll add more at that point. The white is a solid white that I just added. This is a blue mica, turquoise. We'll do a silver. This one's a solid silver too. Some of these dyes that are in here are translucent. If we want to be able to see into the blank and maybe see a 3D effect around the cone, we might use more translucents. If you're going to do a box or something though, you got to realize that you're going to see the inside too. So when where your tenon is on the lid, you would see that tenon line. So you have to think about those things when you're casting your blank. Maybe we'll do a little bit of green. That's a lot of green. That's going to be a super dark translucent. This takes about 1 drop usually, but all right, that's good. We'll do 4 colors. I calculated this out. There's formulas online. I can tell you that on a square mold, figuring alumilite is pretty easy. It's area, figure out your area. So it's length times width times height. In this case right here, it'd be 1 by 1 by 5 1/4. So you're a little over 5 inches. And then you multiply that when you get your area by 0.554. That's what this takes volume-wise. In a cylinder, I cheat. I go online and I have a cylinder area formula. I plug in my radius and I plug in my height, and it shoots my dimension out. Yeah, and there is a formula. I'm just lazy. I don't use it. I calculated this out if I filled it to be right at 40 ounces if it was empty. So I'm guessing at how much burl, or in this case pine cone, is in there taking up space, and I don't think it's very much. So since I don't think it is much, I'm going to do probably 40 ounces, and then if we have extra, we'll pour a pin blank. I usually have a couple extra blanks, a couple extra molds ready to go for that purpose. And I overcalculate what I'm going to need, because if I'm under, I have a short project. Or I'm scrambling to try to mix more up, and that's not a good thing, because now they're curing at different rates, and it can cause cracking in your cast. So I figured 40 ounces, we'll do 40 ounces. I like these molds. I drill a hole in the bottom of them. I cheat. I put a tape over it. And at the end, when it's cured, I just hit it and pop it out. These molds were designed to take apart. Or there's these molds. They're nice. They're flexible. And we can pour right into these. No silicone or no mold release at all. And they'll just pop right out. And we'll just do these ones when we're done, if we have extra. So let's go ahead and get this cast going. So I'm going to tear this on my scale. So I'm going to start it with it on the scale. And I'm going to be in ounces, because that's what I figured my formula in. So I need 20 ounces of each. This is measured by volume, not by... It's measured by weight, not by volume. So you have to weigh this out. This has a 20 ounce thing on it, and I know I need 20 ounces. Don't pour 20 ounces of this and then top it off with 20 ounces of this, because you're going to be off. Part B weighs more than Part A. I can tell you that already. So you have to do it this way. So we're going to start, and we're going to hit as close to... I usually pour B first because it's a little thicker, and I'm going to go up to 20 ounces. So just went over to 1 pound, so that's 16. So I need 16.4. If I was doing less, if I was doing these, if I was just doing pen blanks, the smaller the blank, the more precise you need to be with this formula. If I'm off a couple grams one way or the other right now, it's not going to hurt me because it's a big pour. If I'm off a couple grams in one of these, it's not going to cure right, or it's going to be brittle, or you're going to have problems with it. So if I was measuring these up, and I figured whatever, I needed 3 ounces to do one of these, I would go to 1.5 ounces on my first one. I would hit the button and go to grams, and I'd switch it over to grams, and whatever that gram number that pops up on my screen is now, that's how many more grams I'm going to add of this part. So now I've converted it to grams, and I'm going to be a lot more precise. You understand what I mean? Did I lose anybody there? Okay. So that's the way to do it to get you down to grams. And I can tell you that these empty are 1 by 1 by 5s. They take almost 3 ounces. But I don't want to work that hard to convert ounces to grams and all that. My scale does that for me. So this is 1.4, so I need 2.8. So 2 pounds, 8 ounces. So here we go. Now our 7 minutes has just started. Because if I convert it to grams, it's going to really throw me off. Because once I get to grams, it starts reading ounces too. Once it gets to so many grams, it converts that one big number to ounces, and then I get confused. So I don't do it that way usually on big pours. Again, this is side A. It's a little bit thinner. It's easier for me to hit that number. Side B will thicken up on you a little bit. So that's it on the money, 2.8. So now the clock is ticking. We have that 7 minutes. When you're stirring this and mixing it, if you look in there, if you could see it, if this was clear, there's strings. It's real stringy looking. It looks like it's like oil and water. I mean, it's totally 2 different chemicals mixing right now. We got to get all them strings out of there. We want it completely clear. Bubbles we don't care about. If you use a drill mixer, you can. I would advise you do it on low speeds. Yeah, for a couple reasons. One, the very obvious ones, but if you introduce a lot more bubbles, there's a lot more bubbles to blow up. And when we're making our blanks, we like a lot of different colors in them and color separation. And if you've got a lot of bubbles in it, when they're popping, they're mixing your colors. So we try to avoid stirring super fast with a paint mixer, besides the other obvious reason it can really make a mess. The other thing is eye protection. My glasses already got some on it from the last cast, or I'd be wearing other glasses right now. I wouldn't normally be wearing my good glasses for this. So wear eye protection. One of our members of one of our groups just had I think it was a $3,000 emergency room bill from this in his eye. So not a good thing. And plus he was down for quite a while. All right, so strings are out of it. We stirred a couple minutes there. We probably got to get mixing. So whatever amount of colors you want. These cups are 9 ounces, so we just did 9, 18, 27, so it's not going to all fit. So we need another color, or we need to mix another one. Let's do a couple more. That's what I mean thinking ahead. I could have had that already. That would have saved a little time. We'll do another blue. And this is a fluorescent yellow. Yeah, maybe a little bit of it. No, the tube is sealed. Let's do a little bit of black. These are Alumilite dyes. I believe that, I'm not 100% on this, but I believe that they are an alcohol base. Water is your enemy with this. You can't use any type of a water-based, that's got blue on it, water-based anything with it. If you introduce water with this, you'll get foaming and you'll ruin your cast. And we'll talk about that when we do stabilizing. That's one reason we have to make sure that the blanks are completely dried. Alumilite dyes they're great for this. They're great for a lot of different things. They, white, black, the fluorescent ones, I believe it's yellow, green, and red, and I think they have an orange fluorescent. So white, black, and the fluorescent ones, all of them are a solid color. So you'll get a solid color out of them. All the rest of them are translucent. So if you just add one drop, you'll have a very see-through, whatever color it is, blue or whatever. Okay, perfect. If you add 2 drops of it, or 3 drops of it, you'll wind up with a very dark. And you can see this is that green, and it is translucent if you look on my stick. I do, but I usually go from lighter to darker, just to save on sticks because we do a lot of casting. So I start with my lightest colors and work up to my darkest. That way I'm not changing my color or altering it very much. Like there, if I would have went from that black to this blue, this would have been a darker blue now. So, okay, so these are ready to go. And we're going to start our pour. So you can do this however you want, and it's starting to warm, which means I'm running out of time. We're going to do this pretty quickly. You can do it however you want. You're the artist. You can do all one color. You can do, I like to see a lot of different colors, so I try to shoot for, we have plenty, for different layers. And with burl blanks, if this was just half fill of burl, I would daub it a few times maybe and do a few swirls in it. Do some, just don't stir too much. If you stir too much, you're going to wind up with one color again. Okay, so that's that, and we got plenty left. So we'll make a few pin blanks here. This is getting very warm now, which tells me I'm right at my limit. So we're going to stop right there. Like I talked about, if I would just burl or whatever, I'm going to do a few swirls. You can leave it, you can have layers, you can do whatever you like. I like a little up and down and a little swirls. I don't want to go more than a couple times back and forth though. And there's one reason right there to think ahead, because this blank doesn't fit in there now. So we're going to try to stack it. When you're tightening these down, make sure you're cross opposing. Do a couple rounds on the next ones. I'll talk about pots a little bit more, and quality and processes with them and all that here in a minute. This started out as a paint pot, that is correct. So I've got a valve here, my valve is off. My compressor's already got air in it. I only need 40 pounds, 40 pounds is what they recommend. I'm going to start introducing air slow. I've got a diverter on this bottom of this pot as well, on the bottom of the lid, to keep air from blowing straight down. If air blows straight down, it's going to blow everything out of my mold. So make sure you put that diverter in there. So we've got 40 pounds now. We can unhook this. And our 7 minutes, where are we at time-wise? So 9 minutes. When it starts warming, I can tell you when I did that last daubing with it, if I'm too late, it's going to be a chunk. So if it's still liquid, I'm plenty good. So temperature does matter. The colder it is, the longer time I have, I can tell you that. I've cast in the middle of winter and had 10 minutes with this stuff.
Do we need a timer set for you on this?
Sure, an hour. Let's set a timer. Anybody? Okay, so let's revert back. Let me clean up this mess real quick a little bit. Absolutely. You can leave it in as long as you want. They say 45 minutes to an hour depending on the size of the cast. Yes, wouldn't hurt a thing. I could pull this out and literally turn it an hour later too. They say it's not that great too because it hasn't cured fully. It cures fully in about 24 hours, I believe. So if I wanted to turn it down to a rough shape, awesome. But if I wanted to start sanding on it, and actually, it probably wouldn't be that great because it's still pretty soft. I'm not going to get as good a finish as I would if it was completely hard. Okay, so vacuum with casting. The problem with it is we don't have enough time to evacuate all the bubbles out of it in a vacuum container. To get this into a vacuum chamber and start pulling a vacuum on it, it's going to be set up before I get to that point. With the pressure, I blow the bubbles up. As soon as I get 40 pounds in there, they're gone. It eliminates them. And I'll show you that with this, what I mean with that. This is a vacuum chamber, and we're going to actually put some blanks in it, and I'm going to pull a vacuum on it in cactus juice in the stabilizing resin. And you'll see that these bubbles will take forever to dissipate. It's pulling air out of them for sometimes days, depending on the blank. So pulling all the air out of here in a piece of wood that's in there, or pulling all the bubbles out of that resin could take hours, and we've got minutes. So with this product, vacuum doesn't work for that part of it. So we'll go ahead and start back on talking about now the whole process that we do from the beginning to make our blanks. So you guys don't know us. We're getting known as Franklin Blanks and Crafts. We sell about, last year we were selling at one point 100 blanks a week. So 90% of those are pin blanks to the pin turning communities. And we got into it, basically the casting part of it, about 4 years ago. And the main reason we got into it was boxes. I was turning a lot of boxes, and there was lots of benefits to stabilizing for boxes. The main one being that if I stabilize a blank and I turn a box out of it, it's done moving. The wood is done. So whatever fit I have on the lid, that fit is there, and it's permanent. I can go take this blank from the desert to the humidest environment, and I'm still going to get that. Still going to be the same fit. So once we stabilize a blank, the movement is done. People were stabilizing for knife scales, for gun handles, for things where there's metal incorporated in them, where if they get any shrinkage or any expansion, what happens? It cracks the blank. So they went to stabilizing to get rid of that. Works great. Well, then the next thing you know with it is the next step up. Well, we like that. It worked so great that we wanted to add some color. So we got into dyeing wood, and then we got into casting. And then we kind of just got attacked and started selling blanks, but that's another story. So those are kind of the reasons that you would want to stabilize a piece of wood. Anything that you don't want movement on, it's done moving. Um, other
Moisture content.
zero. You can't have any moisture in it. Okay, so if we have moisture in a piece of wood, any moisture that's in here, whether it's 1%, 2%, 10%, 20%, any moisture that's in it, when I drop it in here, it's not going to, this solution is not going to replace that moisture. So that moisture is trapped in here, so I'm not getting 100% stabilization. I'm getting 80% or 90% or whatever is all. So now, that moisture that's in that wood is the problem. The moisture, when we go into a dry atmosphere or a dry climate, that moisture starts evaporating. We get shrinkage. As soon as we introduce it to a moist environment or humidity again, we get expansion. So now it's going to start swelling. So anytime you've got that on a box or a pistol grip or a knife scale or anything, you get that and you just cracked your blank or your lid don't fit. So that's the benefits to it.
So how are you drying it before you get it?
Okay, so most of these guys that are doing this process use a toaster oven, a little convection oven. So you can certainly use one. I would put this out there with that. Think about safety in everything you do. These toaster ovens, this product, if it drips on the element, is flammable. There's been, and I belong to quite a few communities, turning communities, stabilizing communities, and there's been a couple fires recently. One guy lost his garage, another one came home to his garage on fire. So if you're going to do that, make sure you're there and you're monitoring that oven. Even drying the wood, you have to monitor it. If a piece moves, shifts, and touches the burner, you've got a fire. So think safety. Personally, I use an electric smoker. We do a lot of blanks, though. So I trim all our blanks to a workable size, a hair over my mold size that I typically want. If a piece of wood enters my shop, piece of burl, whatever, it dries to below 10% moisture. It acclimates to our climate. A lot of times I do that with styrofoam on it, or not styrofoam, but saran wrap. You don't want to put anchor seal or paraffin or anything else on here because it's not going to be compatible with this. If you do get a blank that's got wax on it or any of those above mentioned, the best thing you can do is go ahead and boil it off of it. The wax will float, get that off of it, and then you can start drying your blank again. So you want that wax off of it though. So I keep my pieces in as big a piece as I can, big a log, big a piece till it's mostly dried, 10%, 12%, and then I cut it into my blanks right before I need them, and then I would saran wrap it until I'm ready to go, and then I would put it in my stabilizing, or in my oven, in my case a smoker. Drying this stuff, you need to get it above boiling temperature. So basically 200 and whatever, 17 or 18, whatever it is, you need to be above that. I generally set mine to 220 and let it go. You let it go for 24 hours. You can do a whole burl, you can do small pieces. I prefer to do small pieces because it happens faster. If you're doing bigger pieces, the best thing you can do is go 24 hours with it, put it on a scale, weigh it, mark the weight on it, put it in for 2 more hours, pull it out, weigh it. If it's still the same weight, you're good. If it's lost weight, put it back in for 2 more hours, take it out, weigh it. Do that until it quits losing weight. Once it quits losing weight, you know you're dry. Zero moistures in it. That's the ideal way to dry this stuff. Go ahead. I wouldn't do it because I don't think you get all of the moisture out of it. That moisture is still in the microwave. So the other thing, when I take this out of the oven, uh, as soon as I take it out, we have a dry climate, but as soon as I take it out, it starts gaining moisture right out of the air, even in our dry climate. So really, really important to take it out and get it in a Ziploc bag, get it in one of them sealed food savers, yep. Or what we use for, because we dry a lot, we do a whole smoker worth at a time. You can get the air and watertight file Tupperware big file bins. They're air and watertight. They don't let air in. So once you seal the lid on it, no extra moisture is getting in. It's only going to have what's in there. Getting a little bit of moisture in here is not going to kill you. But we're talking 1 or 2%. We're not talking 10% either. So we got to get as much as we can out. So that's the drying process. The benefit to this, a lot of the benefit is taking worthless wood. This is not too worthless, but I can tell you that I tried turning a piece of this, and I'm pretty decent at turning. I'm not fantastic, but this stuff is super punky. And man, you talk about tear out, you've got to really, really be good at, or you're going to get some tear out. And if I stabilize this, it takes that tear out away. It's a wood hardener, and I'm going to send these both around. I'm going to weigh them first, just so you guys can know. This is out of the same piece, so they were, I think, a couple away, but pretty close to the same piece. So this is a little under 9 ounces. So this is 1.7 ounces. So this is 1 pound 7 ounces. So this is 23 ounces compared to a little under 9. So it's gained 3 times its weight in cactus juice, in the stabilizing. The punkier, the softer the wood, the more it's going to gain. This is red mallee, and it's super dense, super hard. I could put it in here, and I bet it wouldn't gain half an ounce, the whole thing. Dense woods won't absorb it, but there's not really a reason to need to stabilize this. They're not going to move. They're so dense, they're not going to move on us. We do stabilize them for our pin blanks and stuff, and the reason is not for density, but the reason is for dye. So you guys seen how we cast this. If I've got dye in here in mixed one of these, the heartwood a lot of times will absorb dye out of the alumilite. So now I've got a ring or a line that instead of a nice white soft outer rings, I've got whatever color has been absorbed in there, and it's probably not going to be very even. So we do stabilize them, and that's the reason we stabilize even the dense stuff, to keep it from absorbing any of the dye. Do you have to? No. If you're just doing this to turn stuff, you can take any of the hard, dense woods and go straight to this. Cast it. Go for it. Have a blast. If you're going to take a soft wood, though, like that block that's going around, and you're going to try to incorporate it in, if it's a burl, you're going to try to incorporate it into a cast, you better go ahead and stabilize it. Because if you don't, is what's going to happen is, when I start turning this, if this burl in here is not stabilized, when I get it turned, I might get it to the shape I want it. Once I've got it to the shape I want it, the next process is generally you start your sanding. Well, if this is a nice, soft, punky piece of wood, and this is pretty dense, when I start sanding, I'm going to wind up with a ridge here. This is going to sand away a lot faster than this, so I've just ruined my piece. So you can't do it. You've got to get it stabilized prior. So unless you're going to do a dense wood, I would start with stabilizing. And then there's also the factor again if you don't want movement. So let's go ahead and get some pieces in here. Now these have been dried. They came out of the oven and they went straight into a Ziploc. A few minutes in the air is not going to absorb much. This is what I call my homemade float plate. It works pretty good. I've actually got a bottom in here, if I can get it to come up, as well, that I use sometimes. It's not going to work with that big one. Since this is empty, we'll go ahead and I'll show you what the bottom is for in a little while. This is cactus juice. This is the product we're using. There's other wood stabilizers. I've tried 2 or 3 of them. In my opinion, it is the best by far. It comes from turntex.com on the board. It is normally clear. This came out of my chamber. So the good point here is that if you're doing something really, really light and you want 100% that color when you're done stabilizing it, use fresh cactus juice. It's completely clear. Once you do run a batch or 2, your resin is going to come out discolored, like this is. So this blank, it's not going to really change the color on. But if it was really, really white wood, it might tint it a little bit. So if you're going to do white woods, I try to run them as the first batch. Otherwise, I don't worry about it. That one's not going to fit. So normally I would fill this up to a couple layers, up to probably there. Got room for one more at least. I've got 2 other chambers at home, one that's bigger, one that's a glass jar container that works well too. This I just use for a weight. It's going to help hold everything down, keep it from floating. I did. So the lid, all this came from Turntex. You can buy individual parts from him. You can buy the lid from him. You can buy the whole vacuum chamber if you want. It'll come with a nicer bottom. You can buy just the tube from him as well for cheaper and use PVC, a PVC cap, a regular PVC glue, and glue it to it. The problem is that's a round base, so then you need to turn a flat base for it. But you save a little bit of money that way. You can use a pickle jar. Just make sure it's thick. The thicker the pickle jar, the better. And just be leery. If it was me and I was going to use a pickle jar, I would run a few batches empty with nothing in it to test my jar and make sure it's going to hold up to the force, because it is a lot of pressure, inward pressure. It will implode. If anything, it'll blow itself in. Turntex sells ready-made chambers in a lot of different sizes. You can also get glass vacs. There's other vacuum chambers. I can tell you, messing with them, you're really just better off ordering one from Turntex. By the time you mess with gathering all your components, putting it all together, testing it, hoping it's going to work, have one fail, got to start over. It's just not worth it when you can order them from him and have a chamber that's made for this. The glass vacs, if you're going to buy one, make sure it doesn't have a plastic lid. The plastic lid will fail. It has to have a glass lid. And essentially, they are a stainless steel pot base with a clear top. You have to be able to see this cactus juice so I can tell when it's ready to stop the vacuum on it. I'll know when the bubbles stop. If I can't see in this chamber, I can't tell when the bubbles stop. I don't know when to stop. I'm guessing. This is normal PVC. It's Schedule 40. So, yes, I could use regular white PVC. With this lid, I can't see in it then. So that's my issue. So now I need to create a lid that will hold all this and be clear. So we've got this ready to go. We want to make sure that our blanks are submerged at least an inch or two. They have to be completely submerged. You can already see I'm getting bubbles. That's the air that's trapped in the wood. And we're going to speed that process right there up by introducing vacuum to it. So my valve is open right here. And I want to start introducing vacuum to it, and I want to do it slowly. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this a little bit, and you're going to see bubbles start appearing. So, if I hit this all the way, we're going to foam over, or maybe foam over. Bad, bad, bad. Because if I suck juice into this pump, my pump is going to freeze up on me. I just ruined my pump. So we've got to make sure that I call it burping it. So we're going to go a little bit. And if I start getting too high, I'm going to back off.
So this isn't a full vacuum and walk away. It's a very hands-on.
This takes 5 minutes to get it to where I can walk away. So in this vacuum process, we're basically boiling this cactus juice. But when it hits the, I can't think of the right word for it, the pressure for it, it starts boiling this chemical. So a lot of that is actually boiling and it's not air. But it's going to boil off once it reaches its gravity. It's going to quit boiling and it's going to finish pulling that wood out. So let's talk about vacuum chambers a little bit while this continues. You can see that this is a cheap Harbor Freight vacuum pump or chamber that's made. Pressure pot, sorry. This is a cheap Harbor Freight vacuum pump. This pump is over 2 years old. This chamber is over 3 years old. This chamber costs less than $100, or this costs less than $100. That one is a little over $100. Catch coupons, you get 20% off. For a do-it-yourselfer, they're fine. And if you're going to be doing the blanks that the volume we're doing now, my next one up, I would go to something a little bit better. They make these in bigger sizes, so you can do bigger blanks. You can buy these in bigger sizes, so you can do bigger blanks. The main thing is to keep any liquid out of here and keep the oil changed in it. They say about every, I think, 5 runs or so, you should change the oil in it. And I can tell you that this one, the sight glass where the oil is, my oil level is all sludge. So over time, it has sucked some in it, and it's still going strong. Eventually, the fins are going to stick together on it, and it's going to be garbage, and then I'll have to get another one. JB Industries makes, from what I understand, the best pumps out there for this. So if you're looking at spending the money on one, I think they're $200 and almost $300. They're supposedly completely rebuildable. California Air Tools has a 5-gallon pot that's a little over $250, I think, cost-wise. That's a nice pot that you could convert. All these are converted paint pots. If you Google or go online or try to find a pressure pot for casting, you're not going to find one. I think I've seen one out of all the research I did, and they wanted like $700 for it. So it was specifically made for big casting. Pretty easy to convert. It literally is taking the regulator off of here, putting a T on here. Make sure you leave the blow off on it. I set this blow off at, I got an adjustable one so that I can set it. I know this pot will go up to 60. I prefer that. A lot of times I go to 55 or so, especially when I get blanks that are in there that have a lot of cracks in them, that are real tiny, tiny cracks. I want to be able to push this Alumilite in there as far as I can. So the one thing that you have to realize too with this is that filling a crack, filling a void, gonna happen. It'll do it as long as it's an exterior void. So a lot of the burl we get has a lot of eyes in it, and cottonwood is one that's really famous. So a lot of eyes, and as the eyes protrude down, as the burl is drying out, the eyes open up and they create cavities. Well, that's fine if it's on the outside. Alumilite will fill it. But if those cavities are in the inside, there's no way for this to get inside. So that's the biggest issue, is you want to try to avoid something that has a lot of really open eyes on the outside of it, because it could have some open interior eyes. Is that going to ruin a turning on a bowl like this? Heck no, it's not. If I get into this and I've got an open eye somewhere in the middle of it, I'm CA filling it or epoxy with a little bit of the shavings, and it's good to go. But some of those burls will have hundreds of open eyes, and that can be a problem. So you want to kind of be selective with that. The cactus juice, this gallon is $89, I believe, plus shipping. $90. And if you buy more, you can buy, he sells these in smaller containers. He sells them 2 at a time, 3 at a time, or 2 at a time and 4 at a time. If you buy 2 at a time, I think they're $79 a gallon. If you buy 4 at a time, I think he comes down to $69 a gallon on them. So there is some benefit by ordering in quantity.
Might lend itself to a group buy.
Absolutely. Same with Alumilite. Okay, now let's talk about that a little bit. So this stuff has 1 year shelf life. So it's good for a year. It does, when you get into the smaller containers, it comes activated. So that date, that year time frame, comes from the factory when they activate it. When you go to a gallon container size, it comes with a little bottle with it of the activator. So the benefit to that is if I want to buy 4 gallons at a time, they're not activated. So as soon as I activate it, I've got a year. Until I activate it, I've got all kinds of time. So that's a benefit if you're going to order quantity. Think about that.
Curtis also said if you store it in the refrigerator, it extends the shelf life.
Absolutely, yep. Alumilite, on the other hand, let's talk about Alumilite. Let's see. Let's start back here. Let's finish up there. Back to this stuff. We talked about some of the reasons that we would want to stabilize it. One of them that we didn't talk about would be the fact that you guys are all into doing some dye work with your pieces, your turnings. And most of what we're all doing on the lathe, we're turning our piece and then we're applying our dye to whatever part of that piece we want to change the color to. So we're getting a surface dye. If we take our tools and turn that area that we just dyed away a quarter of an inch, probably not going to be any dye left. It's right on the surface. So if we want to create a piece that has dye all the way through it, we can do that with this. This is black ash. It's double dyed. So this is red and green. and it's all the way through. So a double dyeing or single dyeing is done with cactus juice. You take a container, a different container that we only want to mix as much as we need to cover our blank, because once we add dye to that amount of cactus juice, we're not taking that dye out, so that's going to always be that color. So I would pick the smallest container that I had, pour my dye in it, and I can drop, if this covered it, I could drop this down in my chamber and pull vacuum on it without having to use this much dye. So you can use a container inside your container and try to save some of your stabilizing solution. Now, if you're going to do a double dye, for a single dye, that's fine. You go right into here, you suck your dye right into it, you complete the process. If you're wanting to do a double dye, the best way you can do it is you do what's called a soak. So we're going to go ahead and add whatever color dye we want to it. Add our solution, mix it up good. We're going to drop our blank in it. We're going to let it set for however long we want. Or you can take mustard bottles or whatever, set it in a container, pour colors on it, let it saturate it. Pour another color on it if you want a triple dye. Let it saturate it. Pour another one if you want, whatever you want. Keep letting it saturate it until the blank won't take anymore. Then you take it and cure it like you would normally cure it. Once it's cured and hardened, then that first one is going to be your secondary color. So as what happens when you do a soak is any soft spots in the wood is going to absorb the dye. The super dense hard parts of the burl is not going to take the dye. So those parts now, we're going to turn a different color, and that's how we get a double dye. We're going to soak them in here under vacuum and pull our full solution into it, and then we're going to cure it, and that's going to give us a double dye. So you get multiple colors, and there's guys doing triple dyes and all kinds of stuff, and they get all kinds of crazy colors. So once this comes out of here, we're going to wait till all the bubbles stop, and it's not going to happen tonight. I can tell you that this much burl in here, every piece of wood I put in here is going to be different. Something that's soft and punky is going to take maybe days. Something that's dense and hard might be done bubbling in an hour. So once I get all these champagne bubbles out, and I've got just maybe a bubble or two coming up, really small ones, I'm going to release the vacuum, shut my pump off. Make sure you release the vacuum first. If you don't, you shut your pump off and it's harder on the pump. So I would open this up, shut my pump off. So if this sat for 6 hours to remove the bubbles, double that 6 hours. It has to sit submerged for 12 hours. So if it took 2 days, it has to sit submerged for 4 days. So that's the key to this, is what's going to happen is we just pulled all this air out. All the air's gone. It went out the vent in my pump. As soon as I release this level is going to start going down. That's the benefit. That's why we want this to be covered. As soon as this starts dropping, it's sucking this resin into those air pockets in the wood that we just pulled out. What? It is resin. Cactus juice resin. Anyhow, so it's going to pull that into the fibers. So letting it soak those 2 days, it completely takes over that piece. It can't get any more of it in it. Now at that point, then we can take it out of here. I typically have a Tupperware container with a screen on top of it, and I set the blanks on top of the screen, let it drip off 30 minutes or so, let the excess drip off. If you go to Turntex, He will tell you all the whole process. He has videos on it. It's awesome. He will also tell you to wrap each individual blank in aluminum foil. So each one of these he would have you wrap. And then he would have you put it in your oven, your convection oven again, at 100. It needs to be, I believe it's 170 degrees it needs to hit. 178, 180. It's right at 180, I think, or 90. I set mine to 190, and that's what I cure at. If you go hotter, if your oven gets hotter, you're going to get more bleed out. You're going to lose more of the liquid before it sets. If you don't go hot enough, it's not going to cure. It has to hit that 180 whatever degrees or 90 degrees to cure. Once it hits that internal temperature of this blank to 190, it completely solidifies. So it basically, this product, and I'm not sure the whole process or the chemical makeup of it, but from what I understand, the particles actually connect and crystallize at that 190-ish point. I am doing it in my smoker, yes sir. I do it in my smoker. I would not advise drying wood or curing in your household oven. Your wife may not like you very much at all. This stuff, when it's curing, puts off quite an odor. Burl, some of it, when you're curing it or drying it, can put off really quite an odor, especially cottonwood. So you guys have smelled cottonwood when you turned it. Well, add some heat to that. It's really bad. But you can use a convection oven. He'll tell you to wrap your blanks individually, back to where I was talking about. And that's because if your blanks touch each other, they're going to stick together. So once they cure, they're stuck. You can take a hammer and probably break them apart, but it may pull some fibers apart too. So that's the benefit of wrapping them individually, as you can place them next to each other and pile them up in your oven and cure a bunch at one time. That is not how I do it. If you do it that way and you wrap them in foil, where they set, you're going to get some bleed out no matter what. Where they set in that puddle of the bleed out is going to be just a goobery, globby mess on the outside of your blank. So if it's sitting down like this, okay, that's not so bad because I can take it to a sander and sand it off, right? If it's sitting like this, that's all full of cured cactus juice. It's not coming out. So I just ruined this blank. If I go ahead and cast it, when I get to that and I start turning it, when I get to that cured cactus juice, I'm going to have pockets of yellow and clear from the cactus juice. And it's going to look terrible. So it ruined the blank, in my opinion. So that's why we do not do it that way. So in my smoker, I have room for shelves. In a convection oven, depending on your oven, you may not have room for shelves. If you don't have room for shelves, you could put a small tray in there or make a tray out of aluminum foil and then put a little raised grate on it of some sort, any kind of open grate, and set this on top of the grate. All the excess drips off onto the foil on the bottom row. So in my smoker, I have 2 racks. Well, I have 4, but I do 2 layers at a time. So top rack would have the pieces on it, and I tilt them this way because I want the cactus juice to run out of these. I don't want any to solidify inside. I let it run out. The bottom I can sand off if there's some stuck to it. It runs out. On the next tray or next shelf underneath, I have a foil liner, a foil tray that catches the excess juice. The next tray, more of these. The next tray, more foil. And then I have underneath that, I have a pan, so it can't get to my burner no matter what. Timing on curing cactus juice. The bigger the blank, the longer it's going to take. I think Curtis says on pin blanks, an hour and a half, you should get there. A box blank, 3 or 4 hours maybe. A bowl blank, probably 5 or 6. You want the internal temperature to reach it. If you don't get the blank completely cured and you take it out of the oven, you can't start it over. So you get one shot at it to get it to the cured, fully cured stage. On these little blanks, it's easy. Once it's hardened on the outside, it's done. So I can open the door up if I feel it's hard. I'm good to go. If I feel any juice at all, I shut the door immediately and let it finish out. No, hurting it in longer, it does not hurt at all. You can leave it in there for hours. So that's another thought with this too. So when I do a batch of these, like I said, I use a smoker, so I have a lot of room in my smoker. If I was doing a convection oven and I had blanks up to here, it would probably fill my little toaster oven up in one. Okay, so I run them right away. I cure them. But with my smoker, I'll run a batch and I put them in my Tupperware container and I'll put a lid on them and they'll set until my next batch is ready to go. They're not going to lose any weight. They're not going to lose any of the cactus juice. Once it's in there, it's in the blank. The little bit of drip off you're going to get happens immediately, and the rest stays in the blank. So I can keep it sealed for days if I want to, and then when I get enough, then I run my smoker. That'll save you on electricity and trouble. So. No, it does not even have to be sealed. I keep it sealed to keep the dust off because I keep it in my shop, and I've always got dust. So, dust will stick to the outside of it, and then you got dust on the outside of it stuck to it when it cures. So, I would make sure it was sealed in a Tupperware, just with a lid on it, just covered. Okay, so let's go back to bowl blanks now. So. Most of you I know probably, or a lot of you, are not going to take the time or spend the money to go ahead and invest in a chamber that's big enough to do a bowl blank or do a big chunk of wood. It's just not feasible to do. When we get into, I mean, this is $100 and something. The next one up is $200 and something. The next one up is $400 and something. I mean, it gets crazy to do a bowl blank, you know, that's big enough for a piece of wood. When we get over 6 inches, I have one that'll do 6, and I have an 8-incher on the way. But when we get over a 6-incher, we do not put it under vacuum. Okay, so do I get 100% stabilization? No. So I soak this in whatever, completely submerged, something holding it down so it can't float, and I'll soak it for 2 weeks. Just this piece of burl that's in here. And I'll soak it for 2 weeks. So according to Curtis, the owner of Turntex, soaking it, the bigger the piece, the longer you want to soak it. Still needs to be dry. That whole process has to happen. Submerge it, let it soak. The longer you let it soak, the better. The more cactus juice you're going to get penetrating it. He said he had done tests, and once you take it out and cure it, you'll have somewhere around 70 to 80% stabilization, meaning that it would have gained 70 or 80% of the weight versus 100% of the weight if I'd have done it this way. So I'll lose a little bit. But for a punky piece of wood, and you guys got that one, for a punky piece of wood, that works fine. For turning, your in-grain tear-out is gone. Not going to take on moisture. It's not going to move. So it does work. If I was going to have this piece in an everyday use piece with all kinds of hardware on it and bolts and holes and everything else that I was worried about cracking, then I would probably want to go ahead and get a chamber big enough so I could get 100% to eliminate all that for sure. But it does work without this process. You just won't have quite a good results. So don't think that you can't, just because you don't have the money for a chamber, that you can't still go ahead and stabilize stuff, because you can. It works very well. Absolutely. Absolutely you can. So the question was, can you rough out your piece and then soak it in cactus juice? You bet. And in fact, if you're going to do the soak method with it, the thinner you get it, the more it's going to absorb, the better you're going to get out of it, and the less time you have to wait. So, and the less juice you've wasted. Right, right. So, no, but the less juice you wasted, because here, I had to submerge this whole piece and stabilize the whole thing. Well, when I turn it, all those turnings, shavings are stabilized, they're gone. I just wasted all that money. But if I would have turned this piece down and then stabilized it, absolutely, I would have saved some money. Another little trick that's often used in these too, because the product is so expensive, when you're trying to submerge a big piece like this, you want to make sure your container fits it as close as it can. Obviously, the bigger the container you drop this in, the more it takes to cover it, the more product you got to buy. Yes, it's not going to soak it up, all of it. Yes, it is reusable. Once it's done soaking it up, you can go ahead and cure this. The resin's still good. Pour it back in your jug or pour it in another jug. Don't put it in a covered glass container of any sort, though. I don't know the whole process with it. I do know that if you're storing it in a glass container, it's a no-no. Besides the shop factor risk of breaking it, there's supposedly the molecular structure has something to do with free radicals. I don't know exactly what that is, but glass has free radicals too, and it changes the product, put it that way. So put it in a plastic jug. It is reusable. Where I was going with that, though, is I drop it in this jug, and I've got 3 inches all the way around it. That's the smallest container I can find. Well, you can use marbles. Go down to the dollar store and buy a bunch of marbles. Marbles will take up space. You won't have to use half as much. When you're done, rinse the marbles off, use them again. Just make sure they're dry. No water. No water. No water. You can't introduce water in any of this. Everything has to be completely dry, all the way to here. So, water trap on your compressor. You can't introduce water. If there's water in my tank, and I fill it, any water gets in there, I get foam. Runs my piece. Go ahead, Marty.
You talked about don't introduce glass or don't store it in glass, but yet your marbles are glass typically.
Yes. And you can also use a pickle jar for the stabilizing, but I'm not storing it in it.
Okay, so long periods of time you've got that chemical reaction.
Right.
Where you don't.
And it's a sealed glass container for a long period of time where you get that transfer. So I can tell you that one of my vacuum chambers is a large pickle jar. I got it. I say large. I'm not talking the big ones. It's like this big. From not Michael's, but what's next to Michael's? Huh? No, the other place. The World Market. I got it at World Market. But I got it to fit this lid. So it needs to fit this lid. This lid has a gasket all the way to the outer rim, so I can't use a glass jar that's bigger than this lid. But the neck on it is that small, but it comes out and it's square and it flares out, and it's about that tall. And I can do almost twice the blanks in it in one run as I can this, pin blanks. No, it won't affect the Alumilite. Yes, you can. However, that being said, I've done it a few times, somewhere during that process, the question is here, he wants to rough out a bowl, or he wants to cast a bowl, cast a blank, dry it, cast it, and then rough turn it, and then stabilize it. So he's doing the process backwards. That's what he's asking. I have done it, and I had success with it. I've heard it works. I thought it worked. I tried it. It does work. But when we talk about how I do the, I run a batch at a time, and I set them in to the side, and I wait for my next batch. You can't do that if you're going to do it. You have to cure it right away. If it does set in liquid cactus juice for very long, it does start eating this alumalite away. I found that out the hard way. So if you're going to do that process, cure it right away. Okay, so the question is, how much do I sell this for? Let's first start with how much do I have in it. So I figured out a formula that works for most of, because we stabilize 95% of everything we cast. The only thing I don't personally stabilize prior is cholla cactus, because it just does not need it. And I hand pick it. I hand pick the hard stuff. So obviously I've got some cactus juice in it per product. I got the piece of burl in it. I've got the electricity to dry it. I've got the resin in it. I've got the dye in it. I've got the electricity, well, there's no electricity there. And then I've got the time to turn it. Money-wise, it's hard to say a dollar figure on the price of the burl, because I can buy box elder burl or harvest it locally, and I can get it for nothing. I can buy brown mallee or red mallee or some of the other stuff, and I'm $7, $8, $9, $10 a pound to get it here with shipping. I did break it all down cost-wise. It winds up being, weight-wise, if I weigh this blank and I convert it to ounces, it winds up being approximately $1 an ounce material cost. No labor on it. So if I measure this, it's 4 pounds, 15 ounce, or 4 pounds, 1 ounce, so 48, 49, it's 50, right at 50 ounces, $50. That's what I've got in material cost when it's all said and done, plus my labor time. Labor's hard to figure because it literally is a few minutes of this, let it set. A few minutes of this, let it set. A few minutes of this, let it set. So it's hard to figure. I mean, all in all, you don't have a half hour in it, from trimming it to soaking it, to the whole process. So it's not that much time in it. And then the last thing is it gets put on lathe and turned the skin off to see what's inside. That includes the burl cost. But that's figuring about 30 cents an ounce for burl, which means if you multiply that times 16, 30 times 16, $4 and something cents a pound in burl, which is pretty cheap. But I buy a lot of local burls too. Jonathan Medina, other trimmers here, keep an eye out for me. I buy a lot of our local products to put in these. And I really search out good deals on the rest of them. So it averages out, because I get some of it for $1 an ounce, $1 a pound probably, with between some of the burls. So how much would I sell that blank for? That blank I would start, I double the cost of that. So it's a minimum of a $100 blank. The bigger I get with them and the more I like them, the more I price them. That one would probably be $120 because of the grade of the burl in it. I have pressure washer. So if I harvest a piece that's got bark on the outside of it, it gets cut into bigger pieces, gets the skin taken off the outside with a pressure washer, high pressure washer, not your car wash washer. I have a 3,800 pound PSI DeWalt that I use, and it'll take the bark off of most of them. Some of the denser burls, it doesn't want to come off. Try to get it off with a pressure washer, let it dry, let it reacclimate, let it lose that water. Start your cutting your blanks into smaller pieces, get your drying process done in your oven, and then I take whatever's left, I take a pick or a wire wheel and work at it. So most of the burls, a pressure washer will take it right off. How are we doing on time? For this? 7 minutes for this? Okay. So yeah, pressure washer works great. We just harvested a 440 pound box elder burl. That was all burl. It was a trunk. It was 5 foot tall, 3.5 foot diameter. We got the luxury of cutting that one, and I got it for free. And unfortunately, I sold it, but I've got a little bit of it. So, but that's the kind of things that that make that price range for me, that I can put it in that. When we get down into our smaller blanks, obviously that weight ratio goes out the door. It's more time I've got involved in these than material. These we sell our hybrid blanks at $14 a piece typically. This one's a handle blank, but our call blanks usually go for $45 a piece. We do auctions online, and Reed can tell you that these will go for 3 times that a lot of times in auctions. But that's a good question. Let's go back to safety a little bit on this stuff. It doesn't have any smell. I would wear a respirator. I wear just a carbon RZ mask. RZ mask. It's not a 3M double lunger. Is that sufficient for what I do when I use it every day? Probably not. I should probably go up to the next mask. They say if you read the sheets on this, the MSDS sheets, that B is prolonged breathing. B is not good for you. They don't say what it does. They just say it's not good for you. But it doesn't have a smell. This stuff, you can get your hands in it and just go wash them off. It's not going to hurt you. I wouldn't soak in it. But yeah, getting this on you, I get it on me all the time. It's not hazardous at all. As far as that part of it, eye safety is the biggest thing. You don't want any of these in your eyes. When I'm turning, when I'm sanding, or if I've got fine dust coming off of it at all, I put that mask on, the RZ mask. I don't like it. Does sometimes when you're turning it, it does put off a little bit of a smell that I don't care for. If I'm getting a lot of that smell, that vapor in my face, then I definitely mask up. We time? Close? We're close enough. We'll start releasing. So you can see the bubbles have almost stopped now. There's still a little bitty champagne bubble. Jiggling this will release the bubbles that are on the bottom and trapped on the sides too. It's good to do that occasionally. With that much burl, I would expect to go 5 or 6 hours probably in there. I've had some that have went 2 days. If it's got moisture in it, it's going to continue to bubble. You're not going to quit bubbling, and that's a sure sign that you didn't get it dry enough. It's trying to pull that moisture out, and that's where the bubbles are coming from. It's pulling a little bit. So we got 20 minutes out now, or 15? Okay. We're running out of time. So these are pretty easy. Just pop them out. I underpoured these a little bit. I was in a hurry. Can pass them around. They're still warm. And that's really warm, which means we're pushing it just a little bit with this size blank, but we'll try it. Okay, so another thing I meant to mention to you guys, I typically use clear slow. I'm using clear tonight because of time. Clear slow takes 2 hours to demold. I don't have time to do this. This takes 45 minutes to an hour. The reason I use clear slow, if you're doing bigger blanks, I think if they recommend over 30 ounces, I want to say, you should be using slow. It cures a little bit slower, and you're going to have less stress cracks, less prone to cracks. So we're pushing the limits in size with this one. I've been pretty lucky and been able to tell if we've had cracks, and usually I can hear it crack if it's going to crack. It'll crack in my hand, and it might be an internal crack. So I just pulled the tape off the bottom of it. And you guys will love this. So I usually go out the bottom because a lot of times I've got overpour that's stuck to the container. If you've used enough mold release, there's your blank. So how much time? This one goes to the club.
Gain a pretty penny at the auction at Christmas.
This one goes to the club. So, I can find.
We could do it as a mix and see it when it comes. Sell it like that, boss.
You want to sell it like this? Okay, well, I was going to show you what it's like to turn the skin off of it. We can sell it like that. You guys can have the whole thing. I can show you on this.
All right, they want to see the skin on.
You want to see the skin? Or you want to reveal it? You want to reveal what's inside or not? I can tell you you're not going to see a whole lot because I'm not going to take much off, but you would see a little bit of the cones at least. Okay. So when you guys are turning Alumilite, all resins are not created equal. Let's start with that. You go upstairs and buy Acrylester, the pin blanks. That stuff is super brittle. This stuff cuts like butter. The bigger the blank, the chippier it can be if you're not using proper lay speed and proper tool control. Okay, you guys all know, hopefully, what rubbing the bevel is. It applies. Absolutely rub the bevel with this. The smaller the cut, the finer the cut, the more you rub the bevel, the lighter the cut, and the higher the speed, the less prone to chipping you'll be. Do we have a live center and a dead center? I just need a live center. I have a dead center. By the way, this is extremely warm still. We pushed the limit a little bit on getting it out of there. That's fine. Either this will work fine. Yep, that's fine. Perfect. If you hear chipping, stop. sharpen your tool, change your tool angle, rub the bevel. You want to turn it the highest speed you possibly can. Okay, you hear the chipping? That's chipping, that noise. That's chipping. That's bad. If I'm chipping, I'm chipping. I'm pulling chunks out of it. We don't want that. I'm using a roughing gouge and I'm rubbing the bevel with a roughing gouge. And that's chipping. You can use your bowl gouge, you can use a roughing gouge, whatever you like to rough out with. You can use a skew. Skew works great if you have good skew control. You're going to get a little bit of chipping until you get it round. Once we get it round, we want to really work on that. We're starting to see cones. If there's wood in it or burl, you're going to get a lot of short strings. If I'm just turning solid alumilite, I'm going to have nothing but strings coming off of here. So down here, I seen it a while ago, it was all strings. See that? And then you hit a piece of burl and it's going to be short pieces of strings. I've got a real light touch going right now, and that's what we want. You want really, really fine strings coming off of it. If I lower this and use it more as a scraper, I'm going to get more chipping. You got to work slow. So typically if I was going to make, and I don't know what you guys are going to make with it, if I was going to make a box, I would turn a tinion on each end. I use a lot of times a parting tool. And I come in and I can trim that bottom square with it. Start high. Now this one's a lot of cone on the end, so you're going to hear a lot of different noise. Time? 5 minutes? That's just enough. I didn't quite get it all the way around, but here we'll see what we can do here for shaving. Not quite. Nope, still not quite round. Yeah, I'm going a little bit trying to speed up, and I'm going to get more chipping now. I should have a lot lighter cut. See what that speed difference did? All right, you can see what's inside at least. You got part of it turned. I'll let you guys do the rest.
Just slowly spin it right there because you're on camera really good.
Okay.
Right above you.
So here's what I was talking about, the way the cones are. So that's the back of that cone. That is this part of the cone. So now you can see why it's important to put your cones in there the proper way. This is the mini alder cones, and you can see that's laying flat, so you get more of a skeleton look from it. Yeah, looks like a big bug. Anyhow, pretty cool. So finishing this stuff, you can use pretty much your favorite finish. I can tell you that I can get it down to where I can start with 320 on it pretty easily, or higher. You can polish this out without any finish if you wanted to, if you've got, you know, the 3-stage Beal system, without any finish easily. Spraying it with lacquer, go to 1,000 grit, spray it with lacquer, treat it like you would your normal blank. But lacquer works fantastic on it. So you can do a lacquer finish, that's the easiest. You can do an oil finish. The last step that me and my wife usually do, we call it magic time. We get all our blanks up top that are done and ready like this. And right before we get ready to sell them, where's the Mahoney's at, honey? We would hit it with oil. I know I brought it. I had it out. It's a bottle of Mahoney's. I don't see it either. There it is. This is our favorite time. This makes it all worthwhile. You can really see what you have color-wise. You ready?